Shema Yisrael Asher Eloheinu Yahweh Echad. Vahafta et Anat Elohecha ובכל לבבך, ובכל נפשך, ובכל מאודייך, וחיוך הדברים האלה, אשר נחים מצווך, היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם, ושבתך בביתך, ולכתך בדרך, ובשכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, וחיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך, ובשעריך. The language is Hebrew, v'chaya. כי ויחיה אלוהיך אל הארץ אשר נשבע לאבותיך, לעברם לישכח או יעקב, לתת לך עברים גדולות וטובות אשר לא בנית, ובתים מלאים כל טובה אשר למילאת, וברות עצובים אשר לא עשת, כהרים וזיתים אשר לא נתת, והלכת ושבת, הישמר לך פן תשכח את יראי אשר תשכחה מארץ מצרים מבית עבדים. Listen, you who struggles with God. Is that a proper translation? Is there any true scholarship about anything? Is that what Israel means? I don't know. Israel wrestled with an angel on a rock and then was named Israel. I appreciate you patiently. Hello, Pamela. How are you? Oh, my cat is in a mood. And clearly so am I. With the sneezes. Hi. Oh, hello. Ah. Excuse me one moment. Interesting. The allergies, why do they exist? Good morning, Dr. Punk. How are you? How are you doing? It's nice to see you. Oh. Ugh. My sinuses are going to get clogged because of the histamine reaction, and I'm not going to be able to talk very straight. Dreadful. Dreadful, dreadful. Well, I suppose we should move on to story time. That'll make things easier. What are you up to today, Dr. Punk? How have you been? Okay. Hopefully, my respiratory system behaves. Just woke up. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to today. Today is a Thursday. Like other Thursdays. We say all the same words for the Thursday. From the Great Above. So we're repeating the story. I think we've read the story 3 or 4 times, because I like repetition. But every time that we're repeating it, we're reading a different translation. So we read a translation of the Akkadian version, which was very short, which can be found in the library of Ashurbanipal in Nineveh. And now we are reading the ancient Sumerian version, which is longer, but a different translation than the one that we read a few months ago. That one was translated by Diane Walkstein. This one is translated by Timothy Stephanie. Thank you, Fiona. I appreciate that. I strive for that aesthetic, for better and for worse. So I'm reading you multiple translations of the same story because all of the translations are faulty, and because history is faulty, and we don't have complete versions of these texts, and we certainly don't understand what they meant culturally. So by reading different versions of them, I hope to highlight the gaps in between them, right? You can learn something about what is absent by paying attention to what is there, and you can learn something about what is there by paying attention to what is absent. From the great above to the great below. So we go. So that's why I'm reading this story over and over again. Also because I like it, right? And I want to be able to map in my mind, beat by beat, what happens next, right? What happens first, what happens next. So in the first chapter, which we just completed, Inanna and Dumuzi come together in some very erotic postures, shall we say. It's ancient pornography. And then there's a lacuna in the plot, if these things are connected. It's not clear that they are. There's a lacuna between Inanna and her happy wedding day and this, from the great above to the great below, when Inanna descends to the underworld. Why exactly? It's unclear in this story. It's not motivated. In other versions, it's to resurrect her lover, right? So you have to mix and match and see how it goes. In any case, we will start from the great above, like this. From the vast heaven, she turned her attention to the vast depths. From the vast heaven, the goddess contemplated the vast depths. From the vast heaven, Inanna thought instead of the vast depths. The lady forsook heaven and earth to go to the underworld. Lady Inanna forsook heaven and earth to go to the underworld. She forsook her place as sacred priestess to go to the underworld. Magical being, sacred priestess, right? Like, I have aspirations. I'd like to go to the underworld and forsake my places. Sure. Iniruk forsook her temple so she could go to the underworld. In Bab Tibira forsook her temple so she could go down to the underworld. In Zablam forsook her temple so she could go down to the underworld. Within Adab, within Nippur, within Kish, within Akkad, in all the cities where Inanna is worshipped, she forsook her temple to go down to the underworld. She collected 7 arts, gathering them within her hands. With the arts now, she began to make herself ready, setting the prairie tiara, the shugara, on the crown of her head, and upon her forehead she composed the dangling dark curls. Then about her neck she clasped the gracile lapis lazuli beads, allowed the twin-stranded necklace to drape upon her breast. Then enriched her body by enwrapping it in an imperial robe. She painted around her eyes with the cosmetic, "May he come." May he come. Clasping about her chest the breastplate, "May the man arrive." Slipping on her wrist the golden bracelet, then grasped within her hand the lapis lazuli measure and cord. Then Inanna proceeded to the underworld. Her loyal serving girl, Ninshibur, with her, Inanna addressed her these words, saying, "Ninshibur, my reliable aid, my supporter, my source of great words, my battle partner who fights at my side, I am going to the land of Kor, descending to the underworld. If I fail to return, initiate lamentations at the ruins in my name. In the meeting chamber, beat the drum for me. Go in procession around the gods' temples, finger scratching your eyes, mouth, and thighs, wearing the plain single mantle of a beggar. Travel to Nippur and enter the temple of Enlil. And as you go into his sanctified temple, speak thus for him to hear. Father Enlil, assure your daughter did not die in the underworld. Let not your shining silver be dulled by the underworld's dust, your most valuable lapis lazuli smashed into bits for the stoneworker, your aromatic boxwood broken into lumber for the carpenter. Don't let the divine priestess of heaven die in the underworld. But if Enlil refuses your help, which he will, then proceed to the city of Or and go to Nana's temple. and weep tears before Father Nana. And as you go into his sanctified temple, speak thus for him to hear. Father Nana, assure your daughter did not die in the underworld. Let not your shining silver be dulled by the underworld's dust, your valuable lapis lazuli be smashed into bits for the stoneworker, your aromatic boxwood broken into lumber for the carpenter. Don't let the divine priestess of heaven die in the underworld. She's setting up some insurance. Don't let me die. I'm going to go into death, but don't let me die. But if Nana refuses your help, then proceed to the city of Eridu, and then go to Enki's temple and weep tears before Father Enki. As you go into his sanctified temple, thus speak for him to hear. Father Enki, assure that your daughter did not die in the underworld. Let not your shining silver be dulled by the underworld's dust, your valuable lapis lazuli smashed into bits for the stoneworker, your aromatic boxwood broken into lumber for the carpenter. Don't let the divine priestess of heaven die in the underworld. And Father Enki, God of wisdom, has knowledge of the food of life. He has knowledge of the water of life. He knows the mysteries. He knows the mysteries. Certainly, he would not permit me to perish in the underworld. Thus, Inanna proceeded on her journey down into the underworld, but she hesitated for one moment longer and spoke to Ninshibur, saying, Now go, Ninshibur, and remember the words I have given you. And with that, we will pause the story just at the beginning, and we will conclude again tomorrow as Inanna descends and passes through the gates of the dead. Good morning, Sarah. Oh my God. How are you? How are you, Sarah? It's really nice to see you. Yeah, so I'm glad you caught me. We had a little foreshadowing there, right? So Inanna is going to die, and she's going to get caught in the underworld, and then Ninshibur is going to go to the different gods and say, hey, let her out, let her out, let her out. Thank you, Ingrid. I appreciate those roses. Like, I think it's interesting the way these stories are written with such repetition, right? Like, I am reading them over and over to you, and then the act of reading is also repetitive, right? Like, they say the same, the broken boxwood for the carpenter and the lapis lazuli being smashed, and right, they like give you these images, and then they repeat the image again and again and again to drill it into your mind, right? This is your mythology. This is the story. This is what you should remember. Like, it's low tech, right? It's not as vivid as a CGI film, but I think it is effective at capturing the mind. What did you realize, Sarah? What knocks you out? Repetition? What dreams may come where he goes to hell to save his wife? Yes, Orpheus and Eurydice. Art is the most important thing because even the alphabet and the letters, they're little drawings. Yeah, I mean, the history of writing, right? Like the rebus effect, right? Like there would, in ancient Egypt, they would have, like, all of those hieroglyphs eventually evolved into a written language where the symbol, right? You have a symbol for a bull, and then instead of being a symbol for a bull, it would be a symbol for the phoneme bu, right? Something like that. That. I just made that up off the top of my head. But yeah, like the abstracted letter forms absolutely have their root in pictures. That's how we learned to represent. And like, it's funny, like, there's this wild thing that is happening right now, like literally right now in the history of language that hasn't happened for the last 5,000 years, which is that we can communicate in pictures again. Like, we have the facility to be able to transfer, like, vivid pictures to one another as quickly as we can written symbols, which is has not been the case for the majority of the time that writing's been around, right? So I can send you little gifs, right? You can send me roses, or you can post an Ouroboros in the chat, or, you know, Dr. Punk, post something nice, please, to prove my point. Like, I communicate with moving images all the time, in the same way that I, like, with my keyboard, with the same tool, I can sum up certain moving images and faces, right? Facial expressions. I punctuate my writing with facial expressions. Like, people haven't been doing that for 5,000 years. Yeah, all of those facial expressions. Like, they were doing that in ancient Egypt, in a certain sense. But when then we abandoned it in favor of these, like, more abstracted, highly replicable little symbols. But now everybody has digital screens, so our written vocabulary can be expanded into a much more evocative way of expressing. No, you are not the only one that has noticed this. I mean, it's difficult to talk about like historical trends and change because this is so new, right? It's been around for 10 years, maybe 20 years, depending on how you, or 30 years. But like, it doesn't matter. Like, writing is 5,000 years old. So it won't be for another 1,000 years at least before historians can look back to this moment and be like, oh yes, we can see how the reintroduction of emotion-laden images into writing changed the way that humans were able to communicate with one another. Like, we're just at the beginning. But yeah, I think it's so fascinating. And I am excited to live at this brink moment. Yeah. Yes. Yes, talking was first, pictures were second, and literacy was last. And now pictures are back. Indeed, pictures are back. Retro style. Yeah, I was reading this book. Here, let me show you the book I've been reading recently. Ba ba ba. Where is it? The Origin of Signs? Who called it? What's it called? The First Signs. The First Signs, by an archaeologist. This book it's very well written. It's accessible, and it's basically a tour of Ice Age cave art, and there's a symbolic coding in it, right? Like there was a recent paper that came out. It was all over TikTok. You might have seen it, or maybe your news feed is different than mine. But my feed was covered in people talking about this paper that an amateur anthropologist, archaeologist, discovered that they had encoded the birth period, the pregnancy periods of various prey animals in symbolic form, like in the form of like little dots, near the art of the animals themselves in these ancient caves, right? So like when the people were going into the caves to make this art, they weren't just making images. I mean, they were, like, the images were the core of what they were doing, but there was all sorts of other information that they were encoding into those images in ways that like, the full extent of it, we will never be able to translate. Like, the majority of it is lost to history. But occasionally, an archaeologist can go and look carefully enough to be like, oh, I can see some coded messaging in here. Those dots represent pregnancy terms. Oh, right? And there's a lot of evidence all over the Paleolithic world that basically people were counting time very carefully, in notches on bones, and all sorts of ways, because being able to keep track of time was very important. And I think that the people in those caves, they had a relationship to time that I can't even comprehend, right? Like, what would it be like to go into a cave and to paint a drawing very similar to a drawing that somebody painted 3,000 years before or 10,000 years before, and to learn from it, to go into a cave and paint a drawing about what you know, and to look at other drawings and learn information about, like, you know, their pregnancy terms, or who knows what else, like information that your ancestors are giving you from long, long ago, right? I mean, that's why I read these stories, is because I think that there's coded information in them, information that I can't necessarily access on first glance. Probably not info on animals yeah, I mean, absolutely there's info on mammoths and mastodons and things like that. Good morning, Katie. Yeah. Anyway, the image is back. Yes, indeed. Yeah, I should read that paper, but I figure I'm going to finish this book first. I mean, this book is older. It was published like 5 or 6 years ago, but it's much more thorough. Like a TikTok about some new headline that was discovered. Like, it's not actually, like, it's a big deal that he figured out a particular code regarding to animal pregnancy, but there are many, many other codes that people have guessed at, and you see ideas like these sort of bubbling up in the literature every few years or so. You were given an African fertility doll as a gift without knowing what it was. You were preventing... What were you preventing? Did it look like this? Isn't it so good? Right, so the Venus of Willendorf, as an artifact, right, this image, the original, is dated to about 25,000 years ago, right, and you can compare that to this one, right. I mean, this image, I made it, and it's not a perfect replica of anything, but there are images like this that were made in the Kingdom of Judah 2,500 years ago, or 3,000 years ago. It was slightly different. You still have it. What was it preventing? And like, I find the similarity to be between these two images to be striking, because again, they're separated by at least 20,000 years of history. At least 20,000 years, and yet this meme persisted from one culture to the next, right? And so if we want to understand what it meant to the people who made this image, we can ask what it meant to the people who made this image, and there may be some connection because the images are connected. But of course, we don't even know what it meant to the people who made this image, because those people, they were acculturated and assimilated and all the rest. And scholars argue even which goddess this image is supposed to be representing. So there's so much we don't know. And yet the images are evocative, right? Like we don't have to know exactly what they mean in order to be impacted by their like more raw physical form. The doll was preventing you from getting pregnant? No, the doll helped you get pregnant. She's had babies and will have more. When was this, Katie? My friend is pregnant now, and she asked me to make a replica of this for her. I was going to see her today, but she came down with a cold, and so she canceled on me. But yeah, clearly those images. You were preventing it. and the little talisman you think helped it. The doll caused your pregnancy. When? Recently? She's from prosperity. Yeah. She is from the land of prosperity. 15 years ago on January 20th. Have you told that to your kiddo? What do they think about it? Get some polymer clay and make some little fertility charms. It's important. Yeah, my friend was nervous about her pregnancy and the health of her child, and she asked me to make her a fertility charm. And like, I don't know, like I'm not a supernaturalist. Like I don't necessarily think that because I made an image that's very old and gave it to her that it's going to keep her child safe. But at minimum it communicates my intentions, right? Like it communicates that I care for her and that I want her to be well and I want her children to be well. And I do think that those intentions are real and causally effective in the world. Powerful. The doll would sense your intent. Can bake little fertility charms and so you can slip them into her pocket, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You absolutely should. My mother had a little statue like this in her house. She still has it. And I remember seeing it when I was very little, very, very little, like before I could really understand what it meant, and being quite impacted by it. I think the image is very important. Hey, salty and sad. I'm glad you're here too. Hey, fertility doll. Listen up here. Alright. Let's say Arati. Thanks, Dr. Punk. That is my favorite one. Jaya Jaya Arati Vina Vinayaka Vina Vinayaka Shri Ganesha Jaya Jaya Arati Subramanya Subramanya Kartikeya Jaya Jaya Arati Venugopala Venugopala Venuola Papa Vidura Navanita Chora Jaya Jaya Arati Venkantaramana Venkantaramana Sangata Harana Sita Rama Radhe Shama Jaya Jaya Arati Gauri Manohara Gauri Manohara Bhavani Sankara Samba Sadashiva Uma Maheshwara Jaya Jaya Arati Raja Rajeshwari Raja Rajeshwari Tripura Sundari Mahalakshmi and Mahasaraswati Mahakali and Mahashakti Jaya Jaya Arati Anjaneya Anjaneya Hanumanta Jaya Jaya Arati Dattatreya Dattatreya Trimurti Vatara Jaya Jaya Arati Adityaya Adityaya Bhaskaraya Jaya Jaya Arati Sanistaraya Sanistaraya Bhaskaraya Jaya Jaya Arati Sankarachaya Sankarachaya Advaita Gurave Jaya Jaya Arati Sadgurunata Sadgurunata Shivananda Jaya Jaya Arati Vishnu Devananda Vishnu Devananda Vishnu Devananda Jaya Jaya Arati Agastya Munaye Agastya Munaye Shyama Priyaye Jaya Jaya Arati Ayapa Samine Ayapa Samine Dharma Shastave Jaya Jaya Arati Jesus Grave Moses Grave Buddha Grave Jaya Jaya Arati Muhammad Grave Guru Nanak Grave Samastya Grubho Namaha Jaya Jaya Arati Venugopala Natatrasya Bhati Natandrakaratam Nema Vidyobhati Kutaya Magni Tomeva Bantam Namandi Sarvam Dasya Basya Samidam Vivanti Om Gange Kayamane Kaiva Govari Saraswati Narmade Siddhi Kaveri Namastitam Namo Namaha Tvameva Mata Chapita Tvameva Tvameva Vandisha Saka Tvameva Tvameva Vidya Javinam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Kayena Vacha Manasandriyarva Buddhyatmanava Prakrite Sabhavad Karomi Adyad Sakalam Parasmahi Narayana Iti Sarmai Payami Savadharmam Pravichayam Amikam Savadam Vicha Aham Svasarva Papayo Mukshayami Masucha Whatever actions I perform with my body, speech, mind, senses, my nature, my intellect, or my emotions, all these I dedicate to you. Thank you so much for being here to bless this world today. We can all bless the world, because we're all part of the world, and we can bless ourselves for being here together. Thank you. Thank you. You know, I'm not really a fan of those fashion trendsetters. They have too much money. Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate that. I mean, red is a very powerful color, right? Like, we were talking about those Paleolithic drawings. They're almost all done in red. Right? And, like, if you look at the history of language development, like in ancient Greek. Homer talks about the wine red sea, because at the time Homer is writing, there was no word in his version of ancient Greek for blue. I mean, we say the sea is blue now. Of course, it's not blue. It's not red either. But like language words, they always develop in a very particular pattern. You get black first, then white, then red. The ancient Greeks, yes, they do have a history of pedophilia. They would call it pederasty because it's dignified. Whether we label a sexual practice as, traumatizing or not depends more on your culture than on the sexual practice, unfortunately. You wear red for this very reason. Yes, I mean, it's like, right, it's the color of ripe fruit and aroused genitals. Like our deep mammal brain is trained to see red very sensitively. All those fashion brands. Do they? Yeah, I don't pay attention to those fashion brands, really. Red is your favorite color. I do like red. It's important. Red and black and white. See? And a little bit of blue comes next. So. But yeah, I like red too. We'll leave it at that. And we will conclude with Kaddish. So, the mourner's Kaddish, prayer of grief time. It means something different when you say it with people who care about you. Like, it really does. Like, I believe, or people ask me my beliefs, and they are usually saying, oh, what do you think about Ashura? What do you think about Yahweh? Is Sky Daddy real? I don't care if Sky Daddy's real. I don't really care if a fertility totem is going to bless the health of your child or not, right? Like, those are not beliefs that I hold with any conviction. But I do hold the belief that saying words together helps, right? That emotions cannot be processed alone. That we're social creatures and that we need one another in order to understand ourselves. So that's why we say Kaddish together, is because if we can grieve together, then we can experience things, express things, like, I don't know, like, brains don't work in isolation. They just don't. They just don't. So that's why we pray together. You refused to wear red when you were little. Oh, my parents are very disappointed in me. Don't you worry. Don't you worry. So, we can say Kaddish for that. A Kaddish for all the disappointment I have caused my father. For 2,500 years, my ancestors have said these words in response to death and heartbreak, disappointment. Yitgadal vidgadash shemei rabba. V'yama divrachyote v'yam lichmal chute. B'chayachon of yamechon of chayed kolbe Israel. B'galav izman kari v'yimru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'yachol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Ose shalom b'yamramav huya ase shalom aleinu v'yachol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Yitgadal vidgadash shemei rabba. V'chayim aleinu v'yachol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. I've lost track of it. Silly trolls, they can distract you, right? You can be talking about anything, and then, this, barrage of parental guilt just comes into your stream. Let's start that over. Yitgadal vidgadash shemei rabba. Bialma divrachyote v'yam lichmal chute. B'chayachon of yamechon of chayed kol beit Israel. B'agalav izman kari v'imru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min. Yehi shemei rabba mevarach li'olam omei omaya. Yitbarach v'ishtabach v'itbar v'irman v'itnaseh v'itadar v'italev v'italal shemei d'kudisha b'rechu. Le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata tush b'chata v'nechemata. Demiran v'yama v'imru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'yachol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Ose shalom b'mramav huya ase shalom aleinu v'yachol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Ose shalom b'mramav huya ase shalom aleinu v'ya lechol Yisrael, v'imru, Amen. Well, you know, oral health is just as important as maintaining the community health in the chat. You don't worry. It's just what it's like to be on the internet. I've accepted it. Sometimes there's just an incursion of dysphoric guilt. It just happens sometimes, and you recognize the way that it affects your mental processes, and then you move on. And sometimes, rarely, does it make an impact on the stream, but usually you just move on. You missed a troll. Oh no. He was a very effective troll. Distracted me sufficiently that other people noticed. Messed up the prayer. Hey, user. How are you? It's Kimmy's fault. Well, I'm gonna head out. Today, I have a long list of calling doctors. I have to call... How many doctors do I... Oh! Mama! Rude! Scratch. Okay. How many doctors do I have to call today? Let me see the list. I need to call 4 doctors and my mother. I'm trying to book FFS surgery, and it's wild. It's nonsense. It's wild. Yeah, so that's my day. Calling medical professionals and then organizing a panel. But I will see you here tomorrow to say these words once again. And until then, I hope you have a really lovely day. Farewell.